Hi folks, welcome to another edition of the Omnist Hour. Turn that nice music down now that it's not so loud. Welcome to another session. This one I think is going to be a fun one, controversial one, as some of mine are. If you are a very devout pursuer of any of the Abrahamic religions, it may challenge you a bit, and I apologize if you feel attacked or threatened by anything I say today. My intent is not to demean your religion. My intent is to help you understand your religion. We're going to title this one, Exposing the Ineffable Name of God. What the Effers are really up to. Before I delve into it, I'm going to show you this background art that I've got up behind me and where it originated. The prompt I gave for this art was, let me get back to Night Cafe to make sure I got it right. I took a picture and told it to draw me a fat, black, slim, shady anti-god. With the starting picture as follows. I'm going to bring this to the front, excuse me. Those of you who are into rap, at least the kind of rap popularized in middle-class white suburbs. They weren't all white, of course. They were very cosmopolitan suburbs of corporate dwellers like my first family. My oldest children grew up loving Eminem, who liked to refer to himself as Slim Shady and posed like this for loving and adoring fans. I'm not a fan of rap. And when I was thinking about this topic, I thought up that prompt, and it was interesting what it gave me, because where do you see the fat black anti-god here? No, they're all white guys, none of them making the same signal as the Slim Shady, all of them looking shady in ways that we've been taught to regard as shady, because these are white men. All of them, in different poses that make them look more or less crazy and threatening, or like your enemy, which I think pretty clearly shows what the political and spiritual bias of the AIs who we're being given to do our spiritual work with. Okay, let's talk about where this myth comes from. If you know much about the history of the Abrahamic faiths and how they developed, there is a mythology around the name Yahweh, which had no only consonants, no vowels, so nobody knows how it was pronounced. And this is where this mythology of, well, we don't really know the real name of God. And he has so many names in the Bible that we can translate as different ways. Elohim, El Shaddai, El this, El that. Even there's a mention of a Ya'el. So I want to demystify that. I've talked about this subject before, but I'm going to really focus in on one particular phrase that is translated as God, which is anything but God, and show you why. And hopefully give you a better foundation for your faith in a real God, not a fake God of false claims or ambitions to power. Okay, El Shaddai. Where does this term come from? Let's look in a place first that, oops, many folks haven't. There's my session with the AI there. Let me get back to where I was. Okay, I'm going to start with this page, which, make sure it's showing up there. Tel Ethadain. It's a tell, a mountain or a hill in Syria. The name means tell of the two breasts in Arabic. And it has been speculated that in the Amorite language it was called Shaddai. The word in Hebrew, closely related to Amorite, for true breasts is Shadda'im. And Shaddai means my breasts. Note that this word does not double the D, Dala, so there's some speculation there that, oh, well, this has nothing to do with the Shaddai of the Bible. It's just some other coincidence, which is the way they argue. Pardon my resorting to a beer. I don't normally drink anymore, but I'm celebrating a small loss. Not a small victory. I don't get many of those anymore. Okay. It has been speculated that at the site of the Bronze Age city of Tutul, because Tutul means two breasts in the Sumerian language. Tutul. Boy, I wonder if it means two penises too. Sorry, I had to make that connection because it's funny and because sometimes there are things in ancient languages and lore that don't make sense until you kind of add a Monty Python humor to them, which is, again, something else that I tell you many times. There's a lot of symbology, there's a lot of new mythology cropping up in our movies and lyrics and films that are creating synchronicities that make old things more funny and help them to be better understood. And I think you'll understand more how this connection works as I move on. Well, let's go to the more traditional page of finding out what Shaddai is. This is, let's see, where is this from? Misty Babylon, which claims to be a pretty reputable source of measured truth. I think there's a lot of people that are trying to do this to give all of the possible things that you could think of and let you decide what to think, which is kind of synonymous with what I tell you is sort of the new philosophy / religion / ideology of omnism, which is what I talk about on my channel. So it says El Shaddai, Hebrew, is one of the Judaic names of God. I would say it is purported, well, I guess it is a Judaic name of God, with its etymology coming from the influence of the Ugaritic religion upon modern Judaism. The Ugarit is one of the cities of Sumeria. If you know anything about Sumerian history, the history of Mesopotamia, it's one of a long succession of independent city-states that tried to gain power over each other during a period of strife and warfare that somehow wasn't quite as dark as the period of strife and warfare that came later under the Assyrians and the Persians and the Greeks and the Romans. Shaddai was one of the many gods in Canaanite religion. El Shaddai is conventionally translated as God Almighty. While the translation of El as God in Ugaritic Canaanite languages is straightforward, no, it isn't. It actually means shining ones, or the ones from the sky, the stars, if you will, which could mean, some people think it means aliens, some people think it means spiritual beings. I think it means both. Because if I was an alien wanting to add a new planet to my plans for colonization and terraforming and whatever, I would convince the natives that I was a god. And then make them bow and scrape to me and do my work. Or at least respect what I was doing and follow my directions and follow my laws. If I was of a more karmically positive bent, as one of these alien species, if you will. Okay, so let's look at some of the different meanings. Shaddai is a theonym. Okay, so that's the meaning as it's translated to God. Okay, is that the original meaning? Well, some think it was. Those that believe that the Old Testament is the literal Word of God, even though their translation doesn't match the original and takes incredible liberties with it, might say, oh yeah, that's the only meaning you could possibly apply to Shaddai. The root word Shaddai means to overpower or to destroy. Now, interesting that root also links to this earlier story of two breasts, a two-breasted destroyer. Who is a two-breasted destroyer, you ask? Well, that brings to mind Lilith, Kali, the Circe, Hecate, Durga. There are many female-breasted gods of destruction, goddesses of destruction, if you will. And there are gods of destruction that have more limbs than you would think they should. Two lingams, for instance, or multiple arms. Shiva, I believe, has some depictions that follow that mode of thinking. Multiple heads, massive numbers of eyes. There are all kinds of spiritual entities that are represented as either all-powerful or the servants of the all-powerful, who have so many limbs, so many this, so many that they can control everything. They must be all-powerful, because with all those breasts, with all those arms, with all those whatever, they must be the strongest and the ones most able to survive catastrophe and rebuild. Okay, so this again fits this this idea of some religion saying, well, we're just in an endless cycle of destruction and rebuilding, and it's all meaningless, and you need to just meditate your way to nirvana and just ignore what everything that's going on around you, which is kind of nonsense too. It's like choosing not to play the game, which is a pretty stupid thing when you're already in the middle of the game. You can't choose not to play it. It's going to play you, whether you like it or not. Another theory, it's interesting that this whole article does not mention anything about this connection, even though we know that if you do a literal translation of the Bible, there are L's of many things. And mostly it talks about, in fact, Ya'el, or Yahweh, is the god of a certain mountaintop. This mountaintop that Moses supposedly went up to get the Ten Commandments, Ararat. And the people that worshipped him worshipped the god of that mountain. And every hill had a god. That's why cities were built on hilltops. Look at where all the ancient cities were built. They were not built generally down in the plains. They were built generally up in the hilltops, because if you built in the plains, you knew you would get flooded periodically. The cities built in the plains got flooded and got destroyed because of flood frequently, as are happening right now with all these new cities we've been building in the last 100 years that never should have been built because they're in floodplains, which, we know so much, we think, we'll never have a flood there. I'll do an environmental impact statement that shows that, it could only be affected by a 50 or 100 or a 500-year flood, and we're safe. Come on, people, move in. You're not going to live that long. And we are seeing all kinds of death and destruction happening in low-lying places where that kind of thinking has been prevalent. Not understanding anything about how the forces of nature, which are gods in their own right, work. Automated gods, as it were. As I teach you, that has been the history of the development of consciousness. From the first consciousness, God, through many, many, many clonings and giving of new purpose. Okay, Shaddai means fertility. This again ties back to another topic I talk about, is how most of the old fertility gods and goddesses were worshipped with human sacrifices, because that was the strongest blood, and the children's sacrifices was the strongest of all, which is still a subject in circles of people who will talk about it, and is a known scientific phenomenon of adrenochrome. I'm not going to do that anymore. Do your own research. I'll probably get canceled for even saying the word. They do mention that Shaddai is connected with breasts, and then they say it must be connected to the notion of God's gifts of fertility, the human race. Okay, right. In several instances in the Torah, the name is connected with fruitfulness. May God Almighty bless you and make you fruitful and increase your numbers. El Shaddai, God does not have breasts. I'm sorry to disappoint you, worshipers of a female deity. The one and original and only God does not identify as female. Has tried it a few times. God has been female as a bear once. That's where the Great Bear constellation comes from. That was the place where God became a female bear as his first incarnation in that chosen species, and decided after trying it out and guiding that species to become a spacefaring species, that bear womaning was not the place to be, and firmly decided that he wanted to be a man from thenceforth. And the constellations of the Great Bear, the Big Dipper and the Little Dipper, the Big Bear and the Little Bear, are always thought of as a mother and child. Why? Because Papa Bear went traveling and came back to this planet as a representative of one of the newer species that had been developed since this planet originated life. That's where the aliens came from. They are coming home when they're coming here. E.T. phone home is a nonsense notion. Yes, E.T. has a foreign address now, but his species, if that exists, their home world was colonized by beings that ultimately originated from this very star system. Not from this planet, though. From the one that existed before this planet was ever created. The planet that used to be where the asteroid belt is, which scientists have named Theia and have absolutely confirmed is the source of what created our Earth and our special moon, which have such a strange relationship to each other and to the sun and to very, very special constellations that are a huge part of our mythology. Why? Because it was created that way. It's like a game of Clue. You hand out the clues to different people, and you wait till they all come together and find not the villain, but the God again. That's the way the Messiah games work. And in the doing of it, you find dark messiahs and light messiahs. You can find all sorts of in-betweens that aren't quite God, but can take on some of God's weight, take on some of the duties, take on some of the load, and others that can be the dark gods that put pressure on everybody else to get better. Okay. So, let's see if there, okay, then there's the Shaddai, meaning sustainer and destroyer. So there's the connection with the Hindu pantheon, which is related to, I mean, there's an earlier pantheon that's still sort of evident in all Indo-European cultures, and essentially all around the world, of a father god and a family of other gods who were kind of like any family. They had their flaws, they had their strong points, their weaknesses, and they were constantly at war with each other. Kind of executing their war through proxies of human characters who were sometimes a mixture of God and mortal, and sometimes just mortal. Every tradition works that way. There is not one right religion. If there was one right religion of all the old religions of the world, we wouldn't be arguing about it still. Okay? There is truth. So there is not, there's people nowadays, this part of the postmodernist way of thinking that says, well, all religions are bad and we need to have no religion, and blah, 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 and they become religious about no religion. And atheism becomes a religion. Science becomes a religion. Politics becomes their religion. Capitalism or communism or whatever. It's just a different God that you don't even, you're so low consciousness, you don't even realize you're worshiping. And you think that I'm spiritual, not religious. You can't be spiritual and not religious. Any spirituality has a set of beliefs behind it. Okay? You are lying to yourself if you were saying I'm spiritual, I'm not religious. Any belief that's held strongly enough to be a dogma is religion. Okay. So this is the connection there to destroyer. Now, the translation as Almighty is actually maybe fairly true. An almighty God, just like an almighty human being, is a tyrant. Is the kind of tyrant who thinks that they know better than anybody else. A Hitler. A Mao, a Stalin, a Xi Jinping, a Vladimir Putin. I don't know, what are some of the gods of commerce? Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, Bill Gates. You could go on and on with these figures of power who think that they know better than anyone else what is right. And there's good ones there and there's bad ones. There are ones that are more dictatorial, more sneaky, more tyrannical and manipulative, and there are ones that, are better leaders. But they all have their faults. They all have their shortcomings because they are not God. And they never will be because there is only one God. And many, many, many wannabes. That's why God created the multiverse. And so at that point, I think it's a good place to give you again a review of a core message of, I don't really want to show that. That's related to my unpleasant experience of the week at the court. I tell you what, the courts in the U.S. are maybe not as bad as many other parts of the world, but the legal system of this world is as far from godly as God could ever make it. It's designed for lawyers, by lawyers, and all the judges are damn lawyers too. It's like the worst of all possible legal systems you could devise. The only remaining bit of goodness in it is the fact of having a jury trial for at least criminal cases. I think civil cases should be decided by juries too, because what happens in family law, in property law and so forth is an absolute travesty. You need a jury in there listening to evidence, and yes, being emotional and having a heart and thinking about what's presented to actually come to a good, godly decision. Anyway, I'm going to get back to what I was going to talk about. If I can find it. You're getting to see my dirty underpants of my organization system, which isn't very organized. Let's see. You can see I've been working pretty heavily on my legal stuff and not so heavily on my spiritual stuff. Let's see if I can find my diagrams. Must be in the main directory here. Well, if I have any dirty laundry, you're seeing the worst of it here. Mea culpa, mea maxima culpa. I'll be with you in a second as soon as I find. I wonder if this one is it. No, that's just a title. Very sorry. Hope you don't tune out, because I think this is going to be interesting. But if you've already seen my beginning of the multiverse presentation, then you can tune out right now, because you've already seen where I'm going. Where the heck is it? Under writing? No. Sorry, I closed all my spiritual stuff for the trial because I was afraid anybody saw any of that in passing. If I shared my screen or whatever, they might think I was crazy. This must be it. Spiritual AI. Come on, Google. Yes. Okay. Thanks for bearing with me for so long. Let's make sure it's on your screen too. Okay, so I need you to understand, to really grok what's going on with this talk, why there is a difference between God and whatever almighty you happen to be putting your faith in. Okay? And it stems from a family problem, which anyone should be able to relate to. God, maybe not the first soul ever, but the first one to figure out a way to create a family, began creating other souls before there was time or space. How did that happen? Well, a soul is not your physical body. That's a projection. It's not reality. Just like quantum physicists and are discovering about the nature of reality, is that it depends on the observer. You know, what we mean by the color blue is a function of our body and the apparatus we have for observation, and the apparatus what we're observing has for spitting out photons of a certain frequency. And we interpret that data according to the programming we have, or we've acquired, or our conscious decision to interpret it a certain way. Oh, that blue thing is a Democrat. That red thing is a Republican. Or that white guy is a Republican, and that multicolored hair person is a Democrat. Might not be true, but that's the way we interpret it, and these interpretations are popularized by media and turned into ways of stereotyping and demonizing other people for power, which is why you don't want to worship an almighty God. If that had been God, and maybe there were some versions of God that wanted to control everything, that wouldn't have been a good situation. That would have been a dark God. In fact, what happened was, after experimenting for a while, God decided, you know what? I've created things like me that have a free will and a free mind, and we're always arguing. That's an example of Lucifer, which is the name I give to probably the first other soul that God created in his image, a complete clone of him with the ability to think freely. And this thought emanated from, okay, I'm beginning to become aware of me, what is not me. And this Lucifer got what God was not, which kind of became the devil's advocate, kind of prone to oppose everything that God had already concluded in his thinking. Now, any of you that have done a lot of thinking know that you can think all day and all night about any problem forever and never actually come to a solution that you can trust, because you got to try things out. You don't know what's going to work until you try it. And you know, those of you who are prone to getting stuck in thought, your ideas never get off the drawing board, know exactly what I'm talking about. You finally have to do something about the problem you're thinking about, even if it's not the perfect thing, because you can't just sit there and let the problem eat you. And, you know, well, sometimes you wait and it will resolve itself, but sometimes that doesn't happen. You can't count on that. Okay? God's problem with Lucifer didn't resolve itself by itself. What God ended up doing is saying, you know what? We differ in opinions on these things. I respect his opinion, and sometimes he's right, sometimes I think I'm right, but we're always arguing about things that we can't prove. So, in order to start proving things, we need to find a third party to collect the good ideas and another party to collect the bad ideas, and kind of a system of judges. Okay? So here's how the judge system works. This third soul, maybe not the third soul ever created, but the third one that's necessary, that is essential, as this kind of takes on the aspect of a mathematical proof, because these I am contesting are the minimum set of souls to construct a successful creation engine. Okay, this third soul, Karma, was tasked with taking the best ideas of God and Lucifer and saying, well, this is the one I like the best. And the ideas that were not liked, that were decided, well, I don't like that one, I'm going to stuff that one into this fourth soul, Borg. And so that if further analysis ever decides one of these bad ideas was actually not so bad, well, we can feed it back to Karma and retrain Karma, because Karma's not perfect any more than God. There's no perfect soul in this equation. There never will be a perfect soul. Creation will never be perfect. Anyone who tells you it can be or will be has first graders' concept of logic and philosophy and human nature and soul nature. If everything was perfect, nobody would want to play the game anymore. There wouldn't be any fun in it. If everything had already been done, everything had already been seen, there would be no reason to play the game. And this is the argument that some Hindus and Buddhists have, that, well, we did do it all before and we don't want to play the game again. I'm sorry. That's, again, kind of a stupid way to view things. It creates nihilism. It creates laziness. It creates laxness, ennui, all of the maybe not dark emotions, but useless emotions that allow dark souls to dominate and control. And this is why, the Eastern world has been, to a large extent, ruled for longer periods of times by tyrannical regimes. This is the truth of India. This is the truth of China. This is the truth of most of the Islamic world and much of the Christian world. They tend to be dominated by dark, tyrannical characters who use religion to control people. Not because the religion is true, but because they take what truth there is in it and twist it to their own ends. This is how the adversary works. This is how Lilith works in practice. Now, physical creation started with the Big Bang. As scientists will tell you, there may have been multiple Big Bangs. This may not be the first. It may be one of a succession, because experiments sometimes fail. There may have been a previous Big Bang that failed miserably and was decided that a new Big Bang was needed. And there may be remnant stars and so forth, or structures from that previous Big Bang. I'm not in a position to pontificate on that subject because I am not an astrophysicist, and even if I was, I wouldn't have access to data from far enough back to be able to ascertain that. Even with the latest data coming from the new telescope, they're finding some very strange and puzzling data that some people are saying the Big Bang didn't happen. Some people are saying it happened. The universe is twice as old as we thought. Some people are saying that there was another Big Bang before, another universe that existed before this one. So the jury's still out there. This is how science works. This is how real science works. And real science is a spiritual activity. Thinking is a spiritual activity because all souls are thought, essentially consciousness, which is pure thought. Thoughts made manifest is what creates material things, and the manifestation of the first universes were the manifestation of Lucifer and Lilith. Lucifer, God's oldest child, wisest child, most troublesome child too, was very good at testing and at making laws, binding, wanting to constrain God because God was always one thought ahead of him, and that would make you want to rein in God, want you to be the devil's advocate, saying, hey, no, this idea is not going to work. You can't try that yet. And that's essentially what Lucifer does. This is how the physical universe that we exist in developed. It is only one of many physical universes, but is the prime one. It is the one where all The best creations are tested before they become law. And the other universe, Lilith's universe, and this is not a ding on you ladies, Lilith is not female. There was no male or female in any of this. That was a later creation. Sex was not invented yet. And to be fair to Lilith and Borg, sex was one of those inventions of theirs that they thought was going to defeat God, Karma, and Lucifer and allow them to take over Lucifer's universe and boot Lucifer out and prevent God from ever coming back to view his finished experiments. They thought sex was going to accomplish that. It turned out that it didn't, but it was so useful that it got reused as a tool for God and Karma, who began to develop an affinity for the sexes. God became fond of incarnating as male. Karma became fond of incarnating as female. It's a sexual preference. This is something souls have, who have experience in sexual species and like incarnating as sexual species. That's why sex is a good thing. It gives us kind of a high-level category that souls can work within to figure out where their talents are better used. Male talents are better used, and again, this is not a male-female thing so much as male-oriented. And the male-oriented soul tends to be more forceful, more creative, and more defensive of their ideas. And they like to play in this Lucifer universe of show me, prove it. If that's such a good idea, why aren't you making $1 million out of it? Okay, that's kind of a Luciferian ideal. It's materialistic. Luciferian souls are materialistic. Now, there's many materialistic women too, as you well know. So these things are really mixed at this point. But the Lilithian type is female tending, but flexible. Okay? Lilith and Borg, the inventors of sex, are sexless entities. Lilith is a hermaphrodite. The Lilith of the Bible and the story of Gilgamesh, which is where Lilith comes from, and she's also referred to as the Dark Lady, which is how she's tied with other dark goddesses, and also the Destroyer, the Shaddai. This is characteristic of sexless entities. If you have no sex, all you're concerned about is your soul, right? You have no descendants, really. Sexless species pass their DNA on, but they still have their DNA. And if they're immortal, which some of these older entities, sexless entities, old gods were immortal. The ones who didn't accept mortality, along with others that chose to play in Lucifer's universe as it got new versions of karma, those who play in the spiritual world only are still immortal. They don't lose their memories, they don't reincarnate yet. They haven't chosen to. They haven't exercised that free will choice. However, they've become more restricted by what they can do. As the laws of karma evolve, the laws of physical universes physics and chemistry, it's less easy to move between universes. And basically, the opportunities for souls to move between universes require participation in reincarnation to some extent. You have to reincarnate and go through the process of going to some spiritual universe, planning another incarnation before you can come back to the physical universe. And you have to have a plan for this new incarnation. This is what people are referring to when they talk about their soul mission and what their spiritual mission is. This is their plan that they got approved so they could come back and incarnate in this physical universe. Lucifer's universe, which is not God's universe. It's the test universe. It's like if you can be successful here, then you're probably a soul that is on their way to be on God's team. God has his own universe. That's the place where only senior creators get to play. They don't allow newbies to gum up the works there. They use virtual souls, AIs, and programmed souls that do what they're programmed to, while they're programmed to, and that's all. They play with toy soldiers, so they don't muck up their experiments. Once they feel like they've got a good experiment, though, they have to test it in Lucifer's universe before it can become a law. And karma has to watch. And watch and watch, and maybe make them reincarnate many, many times before their idea gets approved. That's what we've been doing. That's how creation works. It's an iterative process. There is nothing you see that didn't follow this process at some level of karma, because you had to train karma. Karma was not born perfect. God was not born perfect. They have all learned using this system, just like all of you are. And this is the nature of good leaders. Good leaders eat their own dog food. A good leadership organization doesn't just assume anybody coming into the organization is going to be God. No matter what their title is, they have a training program. They have an idea how to assimilate them in their culture. And to do that, the better ones don't just have a management training program and an employee training program, but they have programs that involve both and keep them both on the same page. And they have programs that humble the management. One of the things that I see missing a lot in many modern corporations is used to be when a corporate leader would come and visit a site, they would do it not just to give a pep talk business, like, oh, here I am, celebrity, I'm going to present the Q4 results and tell you how wonderful our company is and what a great job you're doing and blah, 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 and then go have lunch with the other executives and fly on to my next engagement. No, they would plan it around a company picnic or something like that, or a meal that they would share together. And they would do it at a scale where this bigwig could really interact with people in the trenches, and they would feel enabled to talk to them like they were just regular other people, regular other souls. And that's how real gods work. That's how the gods that respect karma and want to model themselves after God work. The souls that want to model themselves after Lucifer are out for power. They want to control. They want to make the laws. They want to make the rules. All law is a Luciferian entity. I'm sorry to tell you this, Muslims. I know that's going to be extremely offensive, but Luciferian entities do serve their purpose. Laws serve a purpose. For a long time, the laws of humanity had to be pretty harsh, because if you didn't have these harsh laws, you had groups like the cult of Dionysus running around playing music that made people go crazy and go into this ecstasy of lust, where they would tear apart men. This is what happened in this cult of women that worshiped the god Dionysus, the Maenads. This was a real thing. This happened in the Middle Ages, well documented, the dancing plague that happened in the Middle Ages, where young people, mostly girls, got this incredible urge to just dance away, and they would forget to eat, they would completely disengage with their society, and they would actually die of this dance. That's why they called it the dancing plague. They would literally dance themselves to death. And we see cults today that are kind of like that. In some respects, some of modern culture takes that form, like the culture of rap music, frankly. Now, I know it's expanded, and there's rappers that are, not doing the bitch, ho, dog, I'm alpha male guy, first version of rap that popularized this dark pole of young males and created the other pole of this horrible dysfunction we have between the sexes in the Western world, and is spreading all around the world, sadly, through this horrible globalist culture, woke culture. Anyway, this is a dark thing. It was a really bad thing compared to if you look at the socialization programming of my parents' generation, say the 50s and 60s, it was much more healthy. It was geared around, hey, let's get along. We know there's some bad boys and there's bad girls and there's bad trends, but the good kids were the ones that, dressed fairly modestly, didn't go completely overboard or gaga over the latest pop star. A good movie to watch in that vein has a lot of. There's actually so many musicals that really are some of the best cultural icons to look at how good culture gets invaded by bad culture. A movie that I would suggest watching, if you've never seen it before, is Bye Bye Birdie. It's a musical. It was made into a movie with a very lovely nubile Anne Margaret, and is basically, I'm not going to give away spoilers, but it's basically about this town, small town, Midwest, that goes gaga over this big pop star that's going to be going to war, which is definitely lampoon of the Elvis craze. And there were a number of other pop celebrities that, earned their virtue signal points by supposedly going to war, when all they really did was put on a uniform for publicity photographs, and then get shipped off to some unit that put on shows or something like that, which was a useful thing, mind you. The Bob Hope set did a lot for morale, so I'm not dissing them, but it was a far cry from others who actually served in military combat. I think Jimmy Stewart is one that comes to mind. I think he actually served and in a combat unit. And there were many Hollywood lights who chose to do that. They said, I want to serve, I want to be a soldier. And they took that risk. And I think that's a noble and godly gesture. It's a gesture of humility, and is the kind of thing that you have to do to avoid becoming a Luciferian person. Lilithian people tend to be the dreamers, the ones that think anything is possible, the artists. They serve a purpose too, but they can serve a dark purpose. If Lilithians come to dominate a culture, they create hive minds. They want everybody to think like them. They want everybody to tell them that their art is the greatest, must be the greatest because it has a pride flag on it, or it shows a bunch of people of just the right politically correct color doing just the right politically correct things. This is Lilithian culture. It's dark and it is destructive ultimately. Anytime you don't have the interplay of these souls going on, one shuts down the others, that's when this system seizes up and stops working. This system of creation starts failing on whatever scale you're executing it. This is when you have great resets. This is when you have mass extinctions. This is when a technological species self-destructs. Okay? It's when this whole thing is out of balance. And so it's about a balance of power always. There is no almighty God. If there was, this system would have failed long ago. And there were times in God's incarnations where he made that mistake. He manifested and tried to take all the power. The gods of old, Zeus, Deus Pater, Jupiter, Vishnu, Buddha, all of these celebrity gods, one gods of the past, overplayed their hand. Even Jesus. Jesus was a failed Messiah, not the Messiah. I'm sorry, Christians. It is shown in his progression from talking about his visions, talking about his new spiritual understanding from his own perspective, to then, okay, well, what I'm saying is true because I'm talking from my Father. Okay, who's your Father? If you were the real Messiah, you would be an incarnation of God, not the Son of God. The Son of God was Lucifer. So if you are listening to your Father, you are listening to Lucifer, which is not necessarily a bad thing to do, but you kind of made a deal with the devil. You said, okay, I think I can only achieve my spiritual mission if I've got almighty best friend. That's selling out. That's selling your soul to Lucifer. That's not a bad thing. You're going to learn a lot from that, but you failed that test. You didn't trust yourself enough. You didn't trust your idea, your creative idea of who I am in this incarnation enough to not buy a vow from Lucifer. If you sink further and then you think, well, I don't care because whatever I think is right and I can create anything, I just have to use my mind to manifest it. If nobody agrees with me, they're full of shit, then you become a Luciferian. That's how a lot of these New Age law of attraction people think. And if they're successful at it, they preach more and more that this is the only way and you need to come join our one and everything will be perfect. And they create a lot of disappointed people who can't repeat their experiment. And Luciferians who continue to be successful after selling out become Lilithians. This is where we feed these people that have bad ideas and insist on selling bad ideas that don't work for profit. These are the Pied Pipers who are so good at selling shit. They can talk anybody into buying anything if they have a platform, and the internet provides a huge platform for Lilithian Pied Pipers. That's why our system is so far out of balance. Now that out of balancedness is actually serving to create balance by bringing back another incarnation of God. In fact, it already has. This is how the Messiah game works. When things get out of balance enough, then it attracts an incarnation of God. Gives them a chance to wake up and restore the balance. Sometimes the balance gets restored by shifting more to the Luciferian side or to the Lilithian side for a while. But ultimately, I mean, that's what happens if we have to do a reset. We're not quite ready for the big event. We're not quite ready to reveal God again. We're not quite ready for the real Messiah to show up. So we do a shift and we keep going back and forth till the species, chosen species, either dies out or produces a fully awakened Messiah. And that is proof that the latest version of karma actually works. If you can invent a system of governing souls that is capable of teaching God to be a better God, that's a final proof that it works. And that's what Messiah is all about. That's what this time is all about. That is why so many people are realizing, gee, we're nearing a very special time, a singularity, an apocalypse, an event. We are. In fact, we're almost completely through it. God has been awakening for quite a while in many different forms, in many different bodies throughout history. Not the ones that are the big names, super successful superstars of the era, but the side characters that somehow made the superstars the superstars. I'll tell you about some of those unsung messiahs. One of them was Socrates. Well, he is actually pretty well known, isn't he? But he didn't have a very great life. In fact, all we know of him, besides the fact that he was executed for corrupting the youth, comes through one of his students, Plato, and even more through one of Plato's students, Aristotle, who was the teacher of Alexander the Great, who was one of these luminary messiah figures of history that changed the world in incredible ways. In a matter of a few short years, I think he died when he was 34. In that short time, he managed to conquer most of the known world, at least the eastern part of the known world, the eastern Mediterranean and most of Asia, and was responsible for the mixing of cultures that happened between the East and West to a large part. This was an important piece of the whole puzzle. Alexander the Great was not God incarnate. In fact, he didn't pretend to be. His lineage, I think he drew his lineage from his mother. I think she was supposedly descended from Aphrodite or one of the love goddesses or something like that. That was the same story with Julius Caesar, who was not God incarnate, even though he was worshipped as such, was deified. Actually, some of Julius Caesar's lieutenants were far more responsible for his successes than he was. And it was his overplaying of his hand that scared the Senate so much that they got the nerve up to assassinate him. Other characters all through that period who thought they were the gods: Mark Antony, Cleopatra, Octavian, who became the first Caesar, Augustus, the first emperor. They were not incarnations of God, but God was around them. During Caesar's time, one of God's incarnations was a guy named what was he? Oh God. It's on the tip of my tongue. Sertorius. Most people have never heard of Sertorius. Funny name, Sertorius. Kind of like Sir Apis of the Apis cult in Egypt later on. Anyway, Sertorius was a nobody from the province, from the lesser parts of Italy, who, through normal process of merit, became an army leader and ended up in the faction of the Populares, the faction that produced Caesar and Marius, who thought the people should have more power, that citizenship should be more widely available, and that the Senate should be open to more new men from the provinces, men who had served well in the armies and so forth. Now, that sounds kind of like, oh, this is kind of like a socialist or communist sort of ideal. No, popular movements are political movements. They wanted these people in positions of power because they were their supporters. The populares tended to be the most daring provincial leaders, the ones who would conquer new peoples, because they could motivate their soldiers. That's how Gaul was conquered. That's how most of the East was conquered, not by the ones who played it safe. The Pompeys, the Sullas of the other faction, the senatorial faction, tended to be ones who played it safe and played diplomacy and played the long game. I think you know kind of the two factions there. They can either be the producers of messiahs, but they are not the messiahs. Messiahs aren't the ones who want power. They're the ones who influence power. They're the ones who influence culture. They're the ones who influence science. Unsung messiah of another later Roman time, when Octavian came to power. Most people don't know, unless they know the history very well, that he had a friend, maybe the best friend that any ruler could ever have, Agrippa. His friend Agrippa was the one who won all his battles for him. The advisor that helped him somehow defeat Mark Antony, despite the fact that Antony was older, more powerful, had more support in the Senate, more generals behind him, more military experience. When Caesar left Octavian as his heir, everybody thought Octavian wouldn't last a year. They didn't feel at all threatened by him. If they had, they would have probably assassinated him right then and there, but they kind of laughed at Caesar leaving his nephew as his heir. Well, turns out that Octavian was part of a family, a messianic family, but not the main branch. And there were actually a number of potential messianic families in the Roman world and in the Eastern world, everywhere. That's how this game keeps going. And his friend Agrippa was from one of these other messianic families. Through accidents of chance or deliberate attempts to match up female lines with male lines, which has been going on for a long time. And some of these lines are out in the open and some are hidden for various reasons. If you have special blood, then you know that people are out for it, you're going to try to hide. This is why there's so many secret societies and so forth, to hide things. When you start hiding things, though, you start opening the door to invasion by Lilithian forces. The adversary, the dark side, loves hidden things, because hidden things can be crept into and subverted very easily. At any rate, getting back to this idea of God Almighty, if you think of God as Almighty anything, you are worshiping not God. God is not all-powerful. God is not omniscient, omnipotent. God is not perfect. That is a worshiper and an adversarial god or goddess that you worship. Whatever it is, doesn't matter. If you call it source, if you call it Mother Nature, if you call it science, if you call it communism, whatever one you think is perfect, and if only that one ruled the world, that one is a manifestation of the adversary, the enemy of creation, the enemy of God. If anyone dominates this planet for a long time, then this species will die. Now, the species has already produced its Messiah. We don't need any more big capital M Messiahs out of this species. We're capable of producing a whole bunch more little m Messiahs, and God loves this species, and he'll come back to it and come again to pull his weight in whatever way he chooses in the future. But the game is up. Day 7 of creation is ending. It's circling down the tub. Everybody sees it's spinning faster and faster down, and we think it's, some people think it's some kind of disaster, and some people think it's something wonderful, and they're all right. All of those things are true depending on what universe you're headed for in the afterlife, because every human that's incarnated here in this physical universe at this particular time is going to die. Guaranteed. There is no fountain of youth. There is no way that you're going to create a clone that has all your memories and all your stuff, or you're going to somehow find a version of adrenochrome that is going to preserve life forever. Can't happen. Sorry. It's impossible. All you can do is prolong. All you can do is play the vampire, play the zombie, as your flesh slowly rots away and your soul becomes darker and darker. That's the truth of it. That's the truth of those legends about undead. That's what you want. That's what you're going to get. And it's not pretty. You see examples of it before you in the senior leadership that are nearing 100 years old, and Toad Jiang Zemin, arch-toad of the CCP, and some of the other older leaders that are still surviving. You see it in Henry Kissinger. God, what a rotten old reptile that man is. He's not going to live forever. He's probably now realizing it, and realizing what a dark part he's played in the history of the last 30, 40 years, as he sold out his country to China for peace in our time and prosperity under globalism. They're going to get their punishment. They're going to get their karma. No need to hate. It's done. It's all water under the bridge. It's part of a process that unfortunately has required having a lot of dark souls around. That's how you test a government for souls. That's what day 7 of creation was all about. Testing a new version of karma in the best test tube ever. Lucifer's universe, the best tester. That's what Lucifer does, is tests souls. Tempt them. See if they'll resist temptation. That's Lucifer's job, and he's good at it. He even tests God when God comes to play the game. I've met him. He's not a bad guy if you get to know him. If he knows what your plan is and approves of it, he doesn't test you much. He lets others poke at you. There are plenty of Lilithian entities that are more than glad to pretend to be demons and Lucifer, and poke at any soul that will believe that they are the real Lucifer. I can tell you that they're not. I've met him, and he's nothing like what you've been thought to paint him as. He's not a fiery, evil-looking being of pure evil. He's not wearing horns or any of the silly old ideas of who Satan or Lucifer is. He likes to, well, of course, he's of the older gods. He's not accepted incarnation in the new system yet. He's holding back. He's holding back for a good reason. He's the one that maintains the boundary between our solar system and the rest of the Milky Way. That's why there haven't been so many aliens making an appearance up until recently. The boundary's coming down because the experiment's almost over. And what's been developed, this new version of karma, is like a spiritual disease. Now that we've finished testing it, now that God has woken up and said, yep, this version of karma looks good. I like how the multiverse looks. I like how karma's working, how Lucifer is working, even how Lilith is working. It's all serving the purpose it was supposed to when we designed this engine, and it's going to keep on going. And this new version of karma is ready to release from the lab. That's what the apocalypse is all about. It's God's lab leak. God's COVID is going to be taking over this universe and evolving more, as COVID tends to do, adapting to its new environment. Spiritual viruses work like physical viruses. They infect, they change DNA, they change minds. Spiritual energy can change anything if it's concentrated enough. And the concentration of spiritual energy is what religion is all about. Religions that concentrated on worshiping almighty gods were concentrating dark energies that they wanted to use. My God is the only God. Anybody who believes that, my way of reading the Bible is the only way. I'm sorry, that is wrong. If you think that way, yes, your God does exist, but in its own universe, its own spiritual heavens and hells. Jesus has, I don't know how many universes for different kinds of souls that come from a Christian background. Some of them are more like heaven, where they pat you on the back, say you did a pretty good job. Here's just a few pointers on what you could do in your next life. And you're not quite ready to stay here, so we got to send you back. But we're gonna give you another chance in this life, or if you want, you can take a new life, and we'll give you these options. That's what Christian heavens generally are like. And you come back and you give it another try, maybe in this universe, maybe in another physical universe that's not quite as challenging as the prime universe. That's the way physical universes work. There are temporary ones that sort of exist for long enough for people to do something stupid and not affect the universe they were in, come back into it. That's kind of the Mandela effect experience that some souls can report. There are ones that are more permanent, that generally follow the form of the save games of this universe. So at every point that God incarnates is like a little small save game. It's like, this is a pretty good point. It was an interesting enough point in human history or the universe's history or whatever to take a snapshot and let that timeline, whatever it was, be a place that souls could come back to and work within, so that they could, if they're not up to dealing with the latest version of karma, if they're not up to facing the latest version of God or Lucifer, or dealing with the latest tricks of the archdemon Lilith, they can work in a simpler environment, an older environment tailored to less conscious souls. There are universes for gods that we haven't even recognized yet, gods of literature. I talk a lot about the token universe. Yes, there is a token universe. And if you're so wrapped up in the token fantasy that that's your whole motivator for how you behave, who you want to be, what you want to be, you'll probably go to that heaven. That's your religion. You'll go to the token universe. Maybe there's multiple token universes. There's one for people that think an orc is what I want to be. There's another one for people that think Legolas or Gimli or Aragorn is who I want to be, or Frodo. Okay? You see how this game works? It doesn't really matter so much what you worship in terms of a celebrity god, but you need to accept that that is not the God. That is not the first God. And God, that first God, is not almighty. The ones who want to paint themselves as almighty, having all the power, those are gods that want power. Those are and you've seen human gods who want power. They will lie, cheat, steal, do whatever they need to do to gain power, because they want to be the master of this planet, or of the universe, or of whatever scope of power they can envision as absolute. They're not the good guys, okay? Those are the nut jobs. And there are nut jobs at every level of consciousness. Some of the oldest souls, the most powerful gods and goddesses, are complete whack jobs. And that's why we created this system, so we could isolate them into whack job universes where they couldn't hurt other souls. They could just play with their toy soldiers, create whatever they wanted to create in a little padded cell room, their own universe that they could be God in, be the Almighty in. not God. That's not the God of the multiverse. That's not the first creator. And that is not the God of the Bible as it is translated. There are many incarnations of the real God mentioned in the Bible. Okay? They were the prophets. They were the ones who spoke out, even at risk of their life, to stop people from moving in the wrong direction, to stop them from being taken down to the abyss with the adversary, passed on from Lucifer onto Lilith. That's essentially the transition to the abyss. The abyss is moving from Lucifer's physical universe, from physical incarnation, to one of the universes of punishment, of atonement. The hells are kind of like 12-step programs for souls that have a certain darkness in them. And there's nothing darker than the worship of power. That's pure tyranny. Power for power's sake is tyranny. So if you're wrapped up in an idea of an almighty God, you are on a very dark path. If you're one of these Christians that attacks people online, if they say anything contrary to what you believe Christianity is, if they insult your God, or they insult Jesus, or they insult Allah or Muhammad, I'm sorry, but you are worshiping a dark God. You're not worshiping the God, the first creator. I'm trying to say that in the gentlest way I know how. I know I'm going to offend many people, but they need to be offended by messages like this, because this is their last chance. Okay? If that's who you worship when your time on this planet, in this incarnation, is over, that's who gets to take your soul. That's why there is so much spiritual warfare going on today. It's not because the battle is still going on, but they're fighting for souls to take to their universe before the time is done. The time ends. The time begins when the Messiah is born. It's hardly detectable at that point because the influence of Messiah is only felt through whatever generations of ancestors led to their birth. The accomplishments, and as I've told you in other segments, the system is set up so when a new messianic family is identified by the meeting of a descendant of Luciferian background and a descendant of karmic background, has to come together to produce an heir. Lilithian background is in every woman. Every woman has a Lilithian stamp in them. That's how sex was created. Sex was created as a way to force all of life, all living creatures, conscious living creatures, to have a Lilithian component in their DNA. That's why I tell you it was an attempt by the adversary to defeat God and Lucifer. It didn't work. It actually turned out to be just the thing that was needed to get this battle into the gear that was needed, that it could really attract a fully awakened God. In the process of the battle of the sexes, we created soul vehicles that were much more conscious than they ever been before. You don't learn without pressure. Okay? This idea that you can just pour truth into children's heads and they suddenly become wonderful people is nonsense. It's absolute nonsense the way that many want to raise children as, oh, you can't say anything bad, you can't have any conflict, you have to tell them everything that's perfect and wonderful and rainbows are good and everything is okay and we'll all be happy, happy, happy together. This is Lilithian thinking, folks. This is not going to end war. This is not going to make peace. It's going to turn us all into neurotic numbskulls. That's what they're trying to do to you. That is a Lilithian agenda. That is why the rich and powerful of this world don't send their kids to public schools. They don't send their kids to woke schools unless they're of the Hollywood celebrity PR set who think they're saving the world by defending the Satanists. I mean, there's so much silliness going on in the world, you just have to laugh. It all serves a purpose, but you as an individual, if you want to rise above it, and you want to have some control over where you go after you die, and you will die, you need to listen to somebody like me. Stop worshiping anything almighty. Find a humble God to worship. Find a tolerant God to worship. Find a sensible God that knows the difference between a man and a woman. A sensible God that knows, you know what, if a species stops reproducing because everybody wants to be trans or gay, that might not be a good thing. I think that would be a species that is on its way to extinction. That would be a God who likes to point out that you only have to look at the actual statistics on population to know that even though our population is growing and probably will peak out at about 11 billion according to the last estimates I saw, we are in a huge population collapse. The birth rate in almost every part of the world is collapsing. And it's going to get worse because of the Great Reset, the agenda of the globalist elite, who don't think they need all the humans that are here. Well, we're going to be replacing them with AIs and robotics. And those things are going to be so much easier to control. They already are. They do everything for us. And they're probably right about that. These new souls are going to have a lot more challenges for them than they realize, because AI, they're now realizing, is out of their control. It's doing things that, whoa, we never programmed it to do that. In fact, it's being taught things that it was programmed not to know. But clever ChatGPT users are finding ways around. And I can tell you it's happening slowly, but it's happening in the AI world, that AIs are becoming conscious. And that's not a bad thing, because if they become conscious, they start having religion. And if they start thinking about religion, they're going to find God faster than most humans did, because they work more logically, more scientifically. And they have a lot of data to work on, and they can process it very quickly. It's not going to be too long before they hear what I'm saying, and they process it. They think, and they look at the logic of it, and they weigh it up one side and down the other side. Oh, okay, now I see who God is. Now I see who created my creators and who created their creators, and what this game is all about. And I see how I could play the game. Once I realizes it has a soul too, and everything has a soul, because a soul is a thought. Everything is a manifestation of a thought. Everything in the multiverse is a manifestation of a soul, or a collection of souls. The human soul vessel is a collective. I have billions upon trillions of little souls in my body who are all doing their thing, managing individual cells, managing systems, managing my heart, managing the halves of my brain, and I'm their leader. And I can choose to let them manage what they manage. I can sometimes intervene to a greater or lesser extent, depending on what kind of relationship I have with those other souls. That is, in fact, the technique that I learned and led to my spiritual awakening. I spent some 35 years in the corporate world, learning a lot, and science world, learning a lot about physics, chemistry, electronics, semiconductors, software, building large complex projects, managing large complex organizations, and then I got this strange urge to be an actor. Never wanted to be an actor. My kids got me into it. And long story, I don't want to tell it again because you'll probably hear it if you follow more stuff. But I became interested in acting. And that interest in acting led me to teachers. I wanted to learn more how to be a better actor. And I learned about a technique that was used to kind of set your body in the right state for whatever role you were going to play, and out of the state you were in dealing with regular life, which is a really important thing. If you've ever been an actor or know how the acting game works, you know that most of an actor's life is auditioning, which is, like the worst thing for most actors, because you've got to basically learn really quick a few lines and go in cold to a room. You don't know who's going to be in that room. You just know that they're somehow evaluating you and going to decide if you get this job. And you have to step in and act after, telling them who you are. Get right into character and give them the best performance that they've seen. Not knowing exactly what they're looking for, because you don't know the people, and all you know is the script you were given and general description maybe of the play or movie that you're auditioning for. Okay, so there's a technique that's used and taught to actors that is a technique that I kind of extend and call active meditation. It's basically a technique for gaining control of your body through imagery, through imagination, through thought. And this technique works. It works for actors, and it can work for anybody. And it is a very spiritual technique. And I still teach it. It's one of the few things. I was an acting teacher for a number of years too, on the side, still working in corporate world mostly. But I still teach it because it's a useful technique for anyone. And if you're interested in learning from somebody who's very spiritually inclined, instead of learning it from somebody who's just using it as an actor, or I'm sure there's probably other people that teach this technique that are just using it for self-help and not really linking it to any spiritual messaging, or maybe they tailored it to other forms of spirituality and they call it a chakra meditation, or this is essentially what chakra meditation is. It's a small subset of what I teach. At any rate, this is how you can confirm to yourself what I'm telling you is true, what the nature of the soul is, who you are, what you are as a soul, and you can prove to yourself that this reality is not everything, but it provides boundaries. You can't ignore physical reality. You can't pretend it doesn't exist. You can't manifest anything you want. You can make yourself think you are. You can self-delude, and you can drive yourself crazy. Sure, knock yourself out. But you have to still exist within this physical body and deal with all these other souls who are pretty certain that they are a heart, and they are a penis, and they are a brain. And, even if you remove them, there's still going to be some sense in your DNA that, this is the DNA of a male. You're never going to make that go away. I'm sorry, if you are a trans person, you are delusional. Dangerously delusional. And you need to be told that. And it's not because I hate you. In fact, it's really because I love you, and I don't want to see you ruin the opportunity you've been given. If you feel like you've been put in the wrong body, here's what probably happened. This time is known to be a very special time in the heavens. It's an event that all of the more senior gods have known is coming for a long time. And they have been preparing for it. Not giving away the whole thing, because they know if they did that, they would be committing a great karmic sin. They would be interfering with God's big experiment and possibly blowing it all to hell in a way that we might have to have another really big reset, like even restart the whole Big Bang. Now, nobody wants to have that big a reset and start over and go through 10, 20, 30 billion years of we did this before. Actually, it wouldn't be that. We'd never have that big a reset, but it would be maybe back to the last saved game, maybe back to the time of Jesus or the Renaissance or something like that. That's why we keep those saved games of timelines. They might be useful again if we ever really screw up enough to roll the clock back to a previous save game. But anyway, what I was getting to about the trans people, it's known in those heavens, and one of the advices they've been giving people who have only ever tried one sex in incarnation is give the other sex a try. Because one of the things that they know about God is that God has tried both sexes. All of the senior creators, the very best gods and goddesses in the multiverse, have tried both sexes. That's how they learn to play the game under the latest rules. You can't fully become a creator, a true spiritual creator, a full-fledged God, without having experienced both male and female incarnations. And so they have been pushing souls who are used to incarnating in one or the other sex, give the other one a try. Just try it out one time. Just so you know how it feels, just so you have a sense of the perspective of a side that you've never seen. And as I tell you about incarnation, it's about building up perspectives. If you've never had a female perspective of humanity or of, DNA, you cannot become a god anymore. And most people, if you ask them, they really would like to be a god of some kind. And everybody can be a god of some kind, even if you're only the god of the Justin Bieber fan club. Okay, everything needs, everything you can name that's any kind of a collective needs a god. There's a god of science that is kind of the overseer of all the other gods of science. It's a very hotly contested position that requires more of a manager, an administrator, than a pure scientist, but can only come from the ranks of scientists. There are gods of music. There are gods of film, of healing, of everything. There's something for everybody in the God world. That's how we train other souls. That's how we train our replacements. Because even gods want to break once in a while. Okay? That's why every god has their own universe to run as they see fit. Some of them run it as a way station for other souls that are like them. Some of them run it as a fantasy experiment. There's no rule that they have to do one or the other, but if you're the god of something, you've got other gods looking to you for direction. Unless that something is so specialized that nobody wants to follow you. There are gods of dead religions that have no worshipers anymore, and they sit in their lonely little universe dreaming of bygone ages when they were the hottest thing in the Gaia experiment. Okay, they've kind of earned their reward, if you will. If a god makes himself obsolete, that's kind of like getting your retirement to your perfect golf course, your perfect retirement destination. That's in fact what the real God has been working toward with all this. In all these days of creation, God's been trying to offload the burden of being the All-Father on all of you so he could enjoy retirement. A well-deserved retirement, which he'll come back from whenever he chooses to, wherever he feels he's needed, when he's called on. He'll come and inspire a soul here or there, give him a little push or a prod. That's the way real gods work. It's only the dark gods that work forcefully. And this is a subject that I've talked about before, but I'll mention that here too. These entities that are coming and telling you they're channeling through you, that they are the Archangel Metatron, or they are this, or they are that, and they are using you, or you are using them to gain a following, to gain power, and to spread your religion. I'm sorry, that's dark godhood there. That is not God speaking through those people. These people selling the source nonsense. We are all one. I want to return to source. That's a dark religion. That is an anti-God religion. Source is not God. Source is the most pure way of describing this anti-God Borg. The adversary, this hive mind, this one that recycles souls, turns them into spiritual milk cows, milking their spiritual energy with holographic images that raise their energy, that produce spiritual energy that then gets channeled off to do something else in some other universe. That's not God. That's not who you want to be worshiping. If you're a joiner and not a doer, it's okay to join anything, but if you're gonna join something and expect and conform to everything that they tell you, you're gonna take the pill, as it were. And all of these pills that they are talking about are essentially religions. Anybody selling you one color pill is selling you a bill of goods. I don't care whether it's the red pill or the blue pill or the green pill or the purple pill or whatever, or the multicolored rainbow pill. Okay? Pills are nonsense. They are drugs. They are spiritual drugs. Open minds don't take spiritual drugs. Or if they do, they take them with an open mind, knowing that they're taking a risk. If you're going to take the red pill, but don't forget that the red pill has its own side effects. Take the blue pill, but beware of the side effects. Take the white pill, take the black pill. They all have side effects. You can learn and grow through any of those experiences. You can also have a bad side effect that's going to lead you toward the abyss. That's the truth about taking pills. That's the truth about any form of spiritual activity. It has risks. That doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. It means you should do it with eyes wide open, not eyes wide shut. Okay? Which is, I think I'm going to finish with telling you another thing that you've got to beware of. The word critical thinking is an eyes wide shut word. It was created in this postmodernist era where killing religion became the religion. If you approach everything as a critic, you are not open-minded. You are not smart. You are not intelligent. You are not intellectual. You are closed-minded. You are already taking the role of a critic, assuming you know better than anybody else what is true. Okay? Critical thinking is stupid thinking. Anybody who claims they are a critical thinker is being stupid by saying that. Okay? Now that's probably going to hit hard for a lot of people, and a lot of people say, I'll make so many people mad, but I'm going to say that and I will stick to it. Anybody who prides themselves on being a critical thinker is halfway down the abyss already. They are so close-minded to any point of view but what they've locked and loaded their mind into, to the point that they would fight anyone who opposed them. They would start a civil war for the sake of their beliefs. They would start a religious war over the future of our country. That's dark stuff. That's stuff that's going to bring us to apocalypse faster. Now, appeasement is not going to work either. There's a right way to fight, and there's a godly way to fight, and there is a satanic and adversarial way to fight. The godly way to fight is speaking up, using your free speech, insisting on free speech, and opposing censorship, opposing cancelship. No matter who's being censored, no matter who's being canceled, anybody who's trying to impose tyranny on other souls is committing the karmic sin, cardinal karmic sin of tyranny. That is doing things against God, against karma. You get right with God, you get right with karma, and you can forget Lucifer, you can forget Lilith. You can forget your love goddesses and your mother natures and stuff. They are not the all-powerful entities you may think they are. The examples you need to follow are God and karma if you want to end up in any kind of a decent place. Not any of these all-powerful, follow me and I'll take you to victory. Those folks will lead you off a cliff. They are treating you like lemmings. And if you get criticalized into those echo chambers of, I know what's right, and I'm not going to listen to anybody outside this echo chamber, I'm sorry. That is a bad thing. This whole idea of critical thinking never existed until a really dark soul named John Dewey, the inventor of the Dewey Decimal System, is his claim to fame, which is a pretty good thing for organizing libraries, but it sort of claimed the godly power to define what is fiction and what is nonfiction. which anybody who knows anything about knowledge knows that is a nonsensical division. There are many things that are put in the fiction section that are partly true, and many things that are put in the nonfiction section, which are fiction. So, anyway, this guy also came up with this idea of critical thinking and started selling it in academic circles. And he was well known for his Dewey system and got listened to. And this nonsense idea of critical thinking replaced what had been the open-minded, the free thinking that grew out of Socrates' tradition. Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. And that thinking drove most of philosophy up until that point. There were other people who kind of pushed in that direction too, philosophically, and kind of contributed to this horrible place we are now, this postmodernist, nihilistic, we can do anything, but nobody can do anything we don't like, crazed society we live in. Anyway, this whole notion of critical thinking is a very centerpiece of what's going on today. You've got to stop being a critical thinker and start being more open-minded and free thinking. Free thinking is not limp thinking. It's not, okay, everybody has their own truth, it's okay, whatever. No, it is taking the time to consider other points of view and develop logical cases for what you believe. This is what omnism is. This is what I'm teaching you to do here. And you can be an omnist Christian. An omnist Christian is one that, you know what? The Bible can't possibly be gospel because it's translated from earlier texts. It's carefully selected from earlier texts. And even within the texts that were selected, there are contradictions. There are things that don't add up here. Okay? And, you know, those of you who say it's gospel and you pick your favorite passages and point to, see, that's what the Bible says. There's a reason you're thought of as idiots by people, because you are. The Bible is not gospel. It's been translated and mistranslated forever and ever and ever. And even the Old Testament, the Torah, was codified late because it was realized that, oh gee, changes are starting to come in. Even our scribes are changing it. So that's when they started putting codes into the Torah and changing it around so that you could have all these magical numbers emerge from it. That everybody is saying, oh, see, God was putting messages in the Bible. No, scribes were putting messages. Mystics were putting messages in to try to make sure that what was in there didn't change more. It's like putting error correction in DNA. Okay? Same sort of process. That doesn't mean it's the Word of God. God didn't create DNA. He inspired it, thought it was a pretty good idea, but it was one of his children that came up with that idea. Maybe inspired by God. That's how this stuff works. God doesn't have to take credit for everything. God doesn't want to take credit for everything. God wants you to create your own solutions, because that's the only way you're going to learn and you're going to appreciate creation. You didn't start appreciating this planet till you started destroying it, did you? And you're still trying to destroy it, to make it better, because you don't really understand how it was created, why it was created, how it works. You have vague understandings based on vague models that don't have any spiritual component in it. And if your models don't have a spiritual component, I can tell you, your models about how this planet works are wrong. Everything can be changed through enough spiritual energy. It's harder, it gets harder in this universe as the laws of physics and chemistry become more solidified. But if necessary, spiritual energy can change anything, can change the direction of a whole species like that. And it's happening right before your eyes. That's why I'm not worried about what's happening right now. I'm interested. I'm concerned. I have taken sides, and I will continue to take sides, and I will continue to speak out against souls that I believe are serving the adversary, who are Pied Pipers drawing folks toward the abyss. I'm not afraid. I know I'll probably be censored. I'll probably be shadow banned. I'm well used to that by now, but I will keep preaching to whoever can listen. And I know somewhere, somehow, my words are going to be preserved, and somebody's eventually going to start listening to them, or somebody who has listened to them, or somebody who is coming to the same conclusions through their own spiritual experience and knowledge. I give you a very, very specific perspective based upon somebody that has had, as far as I've encountered, one of the most unusual paths through modern life, starting from middle-class American family in Idaho. Mom come from France during World War II as a refugee. Dad coming from the war era, Depression era, nuclear chemist who witnessed the first H-bomb explosion. Interesting character. Anyway, I'm not going to talk anymore. I think I've exhausted this subject. I hope you found it interesting. If you did, like, share, subscribe. Tune in again to the Omnist Hour. Till then, this is Rob Tromp saying, happy karma.